Thanks, Allison.
Thank you. I think we're live. I'm fairly certain we are.
Good.
Yes, we are. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison with the Gallatin County Democrats, and tonight we're joined by Representative Alice Buckley from House District 63. Thank you for being here tonight and sharing an update. We took a little break from these, so it's kind of nice to be back at it.
Thanks, Allison.
How is it going? You took a little time off for the transmittal break, and I hope you were able to get some rest and relaxation and feel human again. And now you've been back at it. So, how have the last few days been with the session?
They've been good. It feels good to be back in the Capitol, and I think there's a bit of a renewed. So we took what was it? I think a 5-day break, transmittal break, which marked the halfway point in the session, and we're all back. I think there's a bit of a collective sense of renewal. I personally feel like there's good work to finish, and that's really driving me. And also headed down the home stretch of the last 45 days. It's a lot too. I mean, it's tiring. It's hard work. We are still moving through bills. We're hearing some bills from the House. We're hearing quite a few that moved through the Senate, and we'll hit House Bill 2, which is our big budget. Probably next week, appropriations is moving that through right now. So it's a lot, but I'm feeling good. I mean, it feels good to be here, and it continues to be a real privilege to get to show up and serve. It feels really good.
That's awesome. Thanks for that summary. Just thanks for being there. So, what's the status of some of your bills that you've been working on?
Yeah, it's good. So I have 3 bills that made it through the House. One is getting heard in Senate Judiciary tomorrow. 2 are getting heard in Senate State Administration next week. And then I have another bill that I will be presenting in House Business and Labor sometime next week. So things are rocking and rolling. I am feeling a little bit nervous to present in front of the Senate because a lot of those faces are new to me. And judiciary is a little bit intimidating, but we'll do that tomorrow. It's a really good bill and passed unanimously through the House. So it won't be a heavy lift. My heavy lifts will be next week, and I'll get a little bit of at least a practice round before
Yeah.
next week.
Awesome. Yeah, get a little familiar because one of the things that I think some people may not realize is that, you are in, and we've talked a little bit about this in some of these conversations, like representatives in the House are in committees and then the floor session and then committees again all day, and senators are doing the same thing. So there's not a lot of opportunity for you to get to know your colleagues in the other chamber. And so not really having those relationships established maybe as strongly. So that makes sense that this would be a little bit of a difference. So what could you so there's a question, could you just remind us what committees you do serve on in the House?
Yes, so I serve on House Taxation in the mornings. That's an A committee, and then my B committee is House Health and Human Services, which meets every afternoon. So we've been working really hard, especially in tax. A lot of the governor's big priority tax bills are coming through, so we've been hearing all of those. They're big bills, they're important bills. They primarily cut taxes for our highest income bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in fact, that's what most of them do, or give tax breaks to large corporations or out of state corporations. So those have been really heavy lifts. And then Health and Human Services is quite interesting as well. So those are my 2 committees. It's been really good.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for reminding us of that. So,
Yeah.
like you're hearing these tax bills right now, and these were the ones that passed in the Senate, right? And now they're being heard by your committee. Um, have you had all the hearings now, or are there some hearings that are coming up on some of these like tax cut bills that we've kind of been following?
Most of the hearings we've had, there may be another. So there are several bills that are cutting our capital gains tax, that are cutting the tax rate for our highest personal income tax bracket, another one that's also cutting that tax bracket. And those we've heard, those
Okay.
create a huge structural imbalance in our tax system in the state. And so theoretically, we might hear another bill that the governor, again, is theoretically interested in that would raise certain corporate taxes.
Okay.
My understanding is that has a bit of a lower fiscal impact. So it's not going to undo the damage that we're doing by running these bills, but it would offset it a little bit. Also, what we've been hearing in these tax committees is that through legalizing recreational marijuana, there'll be an additional revenue source. Again, it's been hard for, I think, Democrats to buy that argument because it's a volatile revenue source. It's also, I mean, there's so many questions about how we're going to roll out recreational marijuana and when we actually start, when we're going to start actually recouping some of those costs and having revenue come in is a huge question mark, and it's pushed out for a number of years. So we'll see. I mean, I'm just really curious. But at the moment, we are walking into another biennium where we're decreasing our general fund by between 30 and 100 million, and that's all being done to decrease the tax burden on the wealthiest Montanans, which is just frustrating and feels exceptionally unequal to me.
Right. Yeah, because absolutely. Because I mean, these tax cuts for the wealthy and the corporations, those tax cuts have to then be balanced because we had like your sole job as the legislature is to do a balanced budget. And so if you're cutting if you're cutting revenue over here, that means we have to cut services somewhere. And so like what are some of the services that you see as being possibly affected, if you know? Like what are the things that might be really adversely affected by these cuts?
At the moment, it's primarily coming out of what we call Section B of appropriations, which is our Health and Human Services section. So that is programs and services that support Montanans, particularly vulnerable Montanans. So good examples of that are Medicaid, it's our SNAP programs and CHIP programs, our WIC programs, our TANF programs, all of the safety nets. We have funding that goes towards mental health services, all of the programs we have across the state that help low and middle income Montanans. And I think that's just one of the most interesting parts about this legislative session is we are systematically cutting programs and services that support working families, support low income families, while cutting taxes for the wealthiest Montanans. And we're at the tail end of a pandemic, and we haven't seen any of the economic development legislation that we thought we would. And we were joking about it on the House floor today. We had a bill that was aimed at an economic development project in Butte, and the sponsor, who's a Republican, said, "This is our first jobs bill of the session." And it's true. We just haven't had jobs bills. And so I think we're coming out of the session, or it's looking like we'll come out of the session having kind of made our mark as the 67th legislative session as one that pushed through conservative priorities. And by that, I mean anti-choice, anti-trans bills, ones that really are tying the hands of local boards of health and health departments. And we're really not seeing any of the promises that I felt like were made in terms of economic development opportunity or potential that I thought we might see. So it's really interesting. I mean, it doesn't feel like a talking point. It just feels like, man, we're living this right now. And that's a really interesting thing to see.
Yeah, the social engineering bills that are exist, and a lot of these bills that we're seeing too are not, they're copycats of bills that are being, proposed in states across the country by very conservative organizations that have a very narrow perspective on the world. And that there, it's come to Montana. Montana is being nationalized right now in a way that I don't think any of us are really comfortable with.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone is watching that wants to post a question, feel free. We do have a few minutes. We'll have to cut this conversation shorter than usual, just to respect Representative Buckley's time. But feel free to post any comments I haven't or questions. So what really do you see as being like the kind of the pace, I think, maybe for the next few weeks? Because the mad dash that led into the transmittal, and just hearing 20 bills in a committee and voting on or debating 70 bills, there was a reason for that, but there's still, or well, I shouldn't say there wasn't a reason for that. That was just pure mismanagement, in my opinion. But um is it slower right now? Is it going to be just as chaotic and intense? What do you think is, or
Yeah, it's such
that?
a good question. And I'm just learning because I'm a freshman here, but I think it's going to be a little bit slower. It'll be really interesting to see how we all do. We had a really hard day on the floor today. A colleague of mine and legislator from Gallatin County, Representative Staffman, brought this great resolution thanking healthcare workers, and it got completely gutted on the House floor and passed amended. And it was just really, I think, behavior that felt really out of line with the decorum we want on the House floor, and also out of order in terms of against the rules that we set for the legislature. And yet it was normalized, and then we moved through it. And I think that's going to be, the pace is slower, but it certainly feels like there are tensions, just in terms of who has the power in the chamber. And it's certainly not Democrats, and yet we're needed. Our 33 votes are needed to help pass legislation. And so I think that'll be a really interesting thing to observe over the next few months, is just what's the tenor like in the House chamber? How are we showing up when lines are crossed? Who is setting boundaries and calling that out? Today, again, it was just such a train wreck. And at the end, a Republican stood up and said, hey, here's, we made decisions here to ignore the rules that we've set for the legislature. And I thought, and that felt really appropriate and articulate and important to me. But I'm just really keen to see how that progresses. I mean, we still have work to do. The biggest work we have is the budget. And then also this huge question mark of recreational marijuana, which has a ton of questions in terms of who is growing and distributing and what the regulations we're putting around that looks like and selling. And then also it has the potential to bring in a lot of revenue. So where's that revenue going? And in November, our voters across the state asked for that money to be earmarked towards conservation. And it looks like at the moment, not all of it will be, and potentially very little will be used for conservation. So I'm just really keen to kind of continue to watch that unfold and see how it kind of plays in with just the dynamics that are existent at the moment in the House.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the marijuana, recreational marijuana, has been one area that has been coming up a little bit, but not a lot. And so, like, what committee would be hearing anything? Where would those decisions actually be made first for, are there bills that are like actually allocating where revenue would go and, that we can weigh in on? Like, could you just maybe educate us a little bit on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so for the budget, I mean, that's moving through appropriations right now, and that'll be heard on the House floor next week. So I think in terms of priorities, in terms of making your voice heard, probably the most effective way is to reach out to your local legislator and say, hey, this is really, and I've gotten a number of those and I really appreciate it. It's like, hey, this thing is really important to me. And whether it's an extra judge in Gallatin County or funding for mental health or funding for whatever it is, public education, public lands, infrastructure is moving through that. There are a variety of projects for our Gallatin County folks, a variety of projects that'll potentially be going, money that'll be going towards MSU. So that's in the budget. And then, oh my gosh, recreational marijuana is a bill at the moment.
Okay.
That being said, a lot of discussions are happening around the bill. And a lot of negotiations, but that's a bill that Representative Hopkins is carrying, and I don't know the title of the bill, but that would be a good one to flag. And that's a governor's bill, and there's a heck of a long way to go, and it's just super interesting to watch that go through.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will look that up and post that for folks so that they can look at it and see where it stands right now. There have been some questions about some of the bills that were heard today. SB 130, and I think these were in your committee, SB 133 regarding property tax appraisals, SB 212 about property taxes, and SB 257 regarding carbon taxing. Are those the bills that you heard today in committee?
Yeah. This is great. You're testing my knowledge. Yeah, so let me start with the easy one, which was Senator Jason Small's bill to remove local jurisdictions' ability to put a tax on carbon. And we just heard the hearing today. It is a really freaking interesting bill because I've just been reflecting on how Republicans are reticent to take local authority and local control away until they're not. And today was a really good example of that, this is a priority for Senator Small and a number of folks who in coal country, and also it would remove the local decision-making and governing authority of a municipality. That being said, I had some questions that I didn't ask about how you would actually enact or implement a local carbon tax. But the main point, and I'll be a really strong no on that, is at the moment there's no jurisdictions trying to do this. So it's useless at the moment, and we're just jeopardizing our cities and towns' ability to make their own decisions and hamstringing them. So for those reasons, I'll be a no vote. Oh my goodness, the appraisal ones, I'm having a hard time recalling them, and I think Senate Bill 212, is that one of the ones that was mentioned?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's one that would require counties to put additional information on a tax bill. And there have been a number of ones like this to try to increase transparency and more information in the process of giving folks their property tax bill. This one felt like it was less well thought out and would place an undue burden on treasurers. There was a number of really thoughtful opposition to it by several county treasurers, and MACO, the Association of Counties, came out against it. So I won't be supporting that for that reason. Although, I mean, with a lot of these, they're nuanced, right? I want to provide folks more information, but it just, it felt like it didn't quite meet the mark. And the other one I can't for the life of me remember. So I wish I could say more about it, but I will get back to that person about that particular bill.
That sounds good.
What is it? 3-1 something?
It was oh shoot, now of course my list is gone. Yeah, I am not sure which one that was now either. But we just have a few more minutes. So is
Yeah.
there anything there are a couple more questions, but they're more broad and um, we kind of answered it about who determines where the revenue goes, and that's in the House Appropriations right now.
Yep.
And a question about conservation not being earmarked as the use for the recreational marijuana revenue, but that's kind of a broad question too. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I'll answer that quickly in the last couple minutes. So, I mean, that feels like such an important question. And I think there should be frustration on the part of the voters because voters overwhelmingly said, we want to legalize recreational marijuana and also we want the revenue to go towards conservation. And you can make a strong argument that that's the reason that that ballot initiative passed. And so, and yet, the legislature does not have to follow, we are not mandated to follow the will of the voters. And so it's a really interesting, challenging, frustrating situation. And if I were a voter who cared about, I am a voter who cares about that money going to conservation, I would be ringing the alarm bells and saying, this doesn't feel okay to me. And you're subverting the will of the voters. I think Governor Gianforte is doing that. He's earmarked all of that money towards his HEART initiative, which is going towards substance abuse and treatment. That doesn't feel appropriate to me. A number of other folks are now grabbing at that revenue. I think the way it's going to shake out is some of it will go to conservation, not much. Some of it will go towards mental health and go in the arena of health and human services. Some of it will go towards Indian country, which is exceptionally important. But it's a really interesting process, and it feels Democrats have been trying to hold the line on that money going towards conservation and respecting the will of the voters. And it feels really interesting to me that that's not the way that it's going to shake out.
Yeah, well, it feels like that's how a lot of this session has been. With a lot of this taking away voting rights, a lot like limiting voting rights is another example, overturning some and ballot initiatives that voters overwhelmingly approved. So yeah, there's a lot like that. Well, it is now time for us to go. But thank you so much, Representative Buckley, for your time this evening. Thanks to everyone for watching. We'll be back next Tuesday, and we'll post the schedule of who will be joining us each week or each day soon. So thank you again so much.
Bye, Allison.
Bye.
Thank you.